Imagine a world where cats weren't just your soft, sleepy companions, but highly trained soldiers ready for battle. At the head of this unusual army stood Major Meow, a fierce, fluffy commander with eyes like emerald lasers and a tiny military helmet that somehow never slipped off his furry head. Major Meow wasn't an ordinary cat. He was disciplined, strict, and absolutely convinced he was the bravest warrior alive. Of course, his soldiers weren't always as motivated. Some were more interested in grooming their tails or napping in the sun. But under Major Meow's watchful gaze, even the laziest tabby had to snap to attention, or at least pretend to. Every morning, before the sun peeked over the horizon, Major Meow gathered his troops. The parade ground wasn't filled with tanks or armored vehicles. No, it was lined with scratching posts, yarn balls, and rows of tuna cans stacked like ammunition. "Attention, soldiers!" Major Meow barked in his best military voice, his whiskers twitching. The cats lined up, some straight, some sideways, and one upside down because, well, cats, training was tough. Instead of push-ups, the recruits practiced pounce-ups, leaping from the floor to the windowsill and back again. Crawling under barbed wire. Forget it, they slid under sofas and coffee tables, emerging with dust bunnies tangled in their whiskers. And instead of target practice, they had the ultimate challenge, chasing the red dot of the laser pointer. Major Meow would sweep the glowing dot across the ground, and his entire army would launch into a frenzy of leaps, tumbles, and tail-chasing chaos. He'd nod approvingly, thinking, yes, discipline at its finest. Of course, not every cat was cut out for military life. Private Mittens, for example, had a habit of falling asleep mid-march. Sergeant Paws couldn't resist chasing butterflies, no matter the mission. And Corporal Whiskers, well, let's just say he considered every training exercise a snack break. But despite the challenges, Major Meow believed in his soldiers. He knew that when the time came, they would rise to the occasion. And that time came sooner than expected. One evening, the alarm bells rang through the base. The enemy had struck. A notorious gang of raccoons had infiltrated the camp and stolen the tuna reserves. Major Meow's tail puffed with fury. "Soldiers, tonight we march into battle. For honor, for glory, and most importantly, for tuna." The cats suited up. Tiny helmets, paw-sized boots, and little belts with toy grenades filled with catnip. Under the cover of darkness, the squad crept toward the raccoon camp. They moved in silence, or at least they tried. Private Mittens knocked over a trash can. Sergeant Paws got distracted chasing a moth. Corporal Whiskers decided it was the perfect time for a grooming session. Major Meow sighed but pressed on, determined to lead his army to victory. When they reached the raccoon stronghold, the mission began. The raccoons hissed and snarled, guarding the stolen tuna with all their might. But the cats had secret weapons, cuteness, and chaos. One cat leaped dramatically onto a raccoon's head, sending it spinning. Another curled up adorably in the middle of the battlefield, confusing the enemy long enough for Sergeant Paws to swipe the tuna cans. The raccoons were fierce, but they weren't prepared for the sheer unpredictability of feline soldiers. Finally, Major Meow himself charged forward. With a heroic yowl, he pounced onto the tuna pile and planted his tiny flag, which was actually just a feather toy tied to a stick. "Mission complete," he declared proudly. The cats hauled the tuna back to base, tails high, whiskers twitching with pride. Back at camp, they feasted like heroes, each soldier munching happily. But Major Meow knew a true soldier never rests. The next morning, training resumed. This time, he introduced new drills: Operation Stealth Nap, sneaking into a room, napping on forbidden furniture, and escaping before detection; Operation Sailing Climb, scaling curtains without making a sound; and, of course, Operation Bath Time Resistance, practicing strategies to avoid humans with water spray bottles. His army wasn't just ready for battle, they were ready for anything. Over time, stories of Major Meow and his fearless soldiers spread far and wide. Other animals whispered about them in awe. The squirrels nicknamed him the Fluffy General. The neighborhood dogs spoke of him with respect, and maybe a little fear. Even the birds on the power lines admitted that Major Meow's army was unmatched. But the cats themselves knew the truth. Behind the strict orders and battle cries, Major Meow wasn't just a commander. He was their protector, their leader, and their friend. He taught them bravery, discipline, and teamwork, all while reminding them that the greatest treasure wasn't medals or glory, but a full belly and a warm place to nap. One evening, as the sun set over the base, Major Meow stood proudly before his troops. The field glowed gold, the tuna stash was secure, and the cats sat in mostly neat rows. "Soldiers," he said, "today we proved that no challenge is too big, no raccoon too sneaky, and no vacuum cleaner." Just then, the dreaded roar of the vacuum echoed across the camp. In an instant, the mighty feline army scattered, leaping over fences, diving under beds, and bolting into hiding spots. Major Meow himself darted up a tree, his tail puffed like a bottle brush. From the safety of his perch, he cleared his throat. A tactical retreat for now, he announced. The other cats peeked from their hiding places and nodded. Yes, even heroes had their limits. Because in the end, no matter how brave, disciplined, or legendary a cat soldier might be, there was one enemy no army could defeat: the vacuum. And with that, Major Meow's legend lived on. Not just as a fearless commander, but as a reminder that sometimes, courage means knowing when to fight and when to run.